As Daniel Carter's fingers ran over my flesh, I found myself crushed against the mahogany desk in his office. My breath coming in quiet gasps. I had never imagined that a routine bank visit would alter the course of my life. I caved as his lips dangled only millimeters from mine, playing with my emotions. My entire reality changed the second our lips touched. There was more beyond the kiss. It was the thrill of the electric current, the sense of peril, and the rediscovery of life itself. Then, suddenly, reality set in. There I was, a married woman, giving in to something I had no business doing in the office of a man who wasn't even my husband. I really didn't want to quit, though. Hello, everyone. I want to start by saying how much I appreciate all of my subscribers, gifters, and supporters. Your loyalty means the world to me. Sharing these stories with you is a joy, and your support is invaluable. Who is with me? Let's dive in. I am Claire Mitchell, a 36-year-old homemaker from Atlanta, Georgia. Everyone thinks my life is great. I have a wonderful spouse, a lovely house, and 2 fantastic children. Eric, my husband, is an upright human being. His unwavering devotion, hard labor, and provision for our family have consistently left me in no doubt. Although it was lacking something, it seemed like I had faded into oblivion after 10 years of marriage. Our chats had devolved into timetables and grocery lists since Eric was perpetually exhausted and occupied with work. Is our former passion still alive? Oh no, it had disappeared. I tried to reassure myself that it was only a phase of marriage. However, I secretly yearned for greater things, focus, enthusiasm, and adventure. And that is how we crossed paths. The man in charge of the bank was Danny Carter. He was enormous, self-assured, and irresistibly attractive. The day began normally enough. I had visited the bank in order to resolve a problem with my account. A kind grin spread across the teller's face as she took me to the office of the manager. I had never seen him before that. Dark brown hair, somewhat graying at the temples, adorned Daniel Carter's early 40s. His powerful jawline and intense blue eyes gave him a magazine model appearance. It wasn't merely courteous when he grinned. A smile of that caliber would render you the sole female in the room. Despite your uniqueness, with a warm and welcoming voice, he invited Mrs. Mitchell to have a seat. Suddenly cognizant of how my garment gripped my figure, I took a seat across from him. For what reason was that ever in my mind? I was only visiting the bank. I could tell he was unique the second he opened his mouth to speak. In addition to being professional, he paid close attention. When I brought up my problem, he first wanted to know about me. He inquired about my current mental state, my status as a parent, and my hobbies or pastimes. His unfaltering stare and the inexplicable warmth that radiated from his smiles warmed me more than the room's temperature ever could. In the 15 minutes we spent talking, I laughed harder than I had in months. The sight of his expression made my heart race as I stood up to leave. With a small lean forward, he whispered to Claire, "Feel free to give me a call at any time." "Yes, I do," as he passed me his card. Our fingertips barely touched, even though it was so tiny. My body responded to the contact. After our brief encounter, my skin tingled and my heart raced as I left that office. The business card I was holding occupied my thoughts as I climbed into my vehicle. What gave me the impression that I had just entered potentially hazardous terrain? I kept thinking about him for days. His charisma was more important than his good looks. Seen, pay attention, urgently needed. Afterwards, I acted irresponsibly one afternoon. "Hello Daniel, this is Claire," I texted him. "The other day, you helped me out, and I wanted to express my gratitude. I hope today is going well for you." Like a nervous schoolgirl, I gazed at my phone, hoping for a response. My stomach turned the moment my screen came up, which was around 1 minute later. "Hello, Daniel, what a delightful surprise," he exclaimed to me. "Claire, now my day is looking much brighter." I felt a rush of excitement at what he said. In the beginning, our messages were completely harmless, just lighthearted banter and laughs. Tension increased with every text. Though, then, unexpectedly, he sent an email that truly took me aback. "It's amazing to see you, Claire." I had to ask, "Do you ever feel like something is lacking?" "Is that so?" he inquired. It seemed like forever as I stared at the message. It was evident to him. He completely understood my feelings. Could it get any worse? I was hoping he'd find out. I desired more. My heart raced when Daniel sent me a message a week later. A reunion would be wonderful. How about dropping by my office? We could have a casual conversation. I received a warning not to proceed. Dangerousness seemed obvious to me. However, my fingers behaved independently. I intend to attend. I responded. I waited outside the bank that afternoon, my chest tight with anxiety. With each stride I took toward his office, I felt closer to doing something I could never turn back from. It was the same knowing smile that Daniel used to greet me. The door abruptly shut behind me, leaving me alone. A pall of tension hung in the air while we were alone. He drew forward, fixing his gaze on me. "Claire, I've been thinking about you," he said with a sound that made my skin crawl. My mistake was not to turn around and go. Contrary to popular belief, I did not do so. I lingered, and with that, it all started. Caressing my wrist, his fingers moved slowly and deliberately. My whole body stiffened up, and I had trouble breathing. In a low, appealing voice, Daniel whispered to Claire, "My mistake was not to separate. This was wrong, and I should have warned him." All the reasons I had to walk away disappeared as his hand slipped around my waist, drawing me closer. His breath was warm against my skin, and his lips were hovering near mine, causing my heart to pound. Locked was the door to the office. There was an undeniable sense of forbidden desire in the air when we were alone. I caved in at last. It was instantaneous when our lips touched. There was no way to reverse this. This was never in my plans. I had assured myself as I entered Daniel's office that I was in charge and that this was merely a casual visit. I knew I was deceiving myself the second I witnessed the primal, deeper darkness that descended into his blue eyes. With the shades drawn and the office mostly deserted save for the occasional faint AC hum, we were completely alone, as I remained rooted to the spot in front of his desk. My gut churned with each passing moment of his fixation on me. He spoke with an exceptionally soothing voice, remarking that you appeared anxious. As I hid a lock of hair behind my ear, perhaps slightly, I emitted an anxious laugh. He got to his feet, walked around the desk, and halted inches away from me. Being isn't necessary. Overwhelmed by the betrayal, I forced myself to swallow. My instinct told me that this would negatively impact my marriage, my commitments, and my children. It was challenging for me to think clearly due to his intense gaze and the way he held my whole attention. From the moment he entered my office that day onward, he confessed, "I've been thinking about you." His fingers delicately traced the border of my sleeve. A cold shudder went down my back. "No, Daniel, that's not right," he interjected with a low, challenging voice, demanding that she tell him she didn't want this. "I will cease if you tell me. Because I really wanted this." I tried to say something, but nothing came out. I yearned for the feeling of love to return. I rushed up and kissed him passionately before I could control myself. Something inside of me exploded the second our lips met. I surrendered to his touch as his hands firmly grasped my waist, drawing me close to him. At first, the kiss was gentle, probing, and exploratory. Later, it intensified, becoming frantic and desperate. His hands ran up my thighs as he lowered me onto his desk, and I let out a cry. With my fingers entwined in his locks, I experienced a surge of vitality that had eluded me for an eternity. The heat between us became intolerable as we pressed against one another, while his breath felt warm against my skin and his lips brushed down my neck. My heart raced. Under his breath, he said something about how amazing I was against my collarbone. Feeling guilty was the appropriate emotion for me to experience. I ought to have ceased. No, I refrained from doing so. I gave in to the raging inferno that had been building inside of me for far too long as I clung to him. At that very moment, I was indifferent to the potential outcomes. In those elusive, passionate moments, we remained entwined for an unknown amount of time. But when I finally confronted reality, it felt like a massive force colliding with me. My hands shook as I withdrew. Out of breath, it would be wise for me to depart. With his thumb lightly touching my lower lip, Daniel gently cradled my face. "Stay." Unsteady on my feet, I shook my head and got up from the desk. Not me. It was a poor decision. As he ran his fingers over his hair, he let out a breath. "Are you seriously saying that?" For a moment, I shied away. My beliefs had become clouded. My attention shifted to the door as I snatched my purse. Cry out loud. I must depart. Even when I opened the door and went outside, the sensation of his contact lingered on my flesh. I could never erase the line I had crossed. And what's worse, I had mixed feelings about it. My fingers were white from clutching the wheel so firmly as I sat in my car outside the bank. Both my pulse and the tingling sensations caused by Daniel's contact persisted. I had completed it. I had stepped over the boundary. There was no turning back at this point. I ought to have felt remorseful. My deceived husband, Eric, should have been on my mind at the time. However, Daniel consumed my thoughts instead. He purses his lips. The objects are in his grip. He effortlessly elevated my self-esteem to that of a queen. And what's worse, some more. Please. The consequences of my actions washed over me like a tsunami by the time I returned home. The TV flickered on and off as Eric sat in the living room. Upon seeing me, he glanced up and grinned. What a wonderful day you had. My heart was racing, and I did nothing but stand there, staring at him. For what reason was he so naive? There was obvious treachery on my face. How could he fail to notice it? With an effort to put on a happy face, I said it was fine. He nodded and turned back to the TV, unaware that another man was holding his wife. I bolted for the upper floor, slammed the bedroom door, and slumped against it, gasping for oxygen. Am I to blame? 10 years had passed since my marriage. A decent man loved me, and he had never done anything to make me question his sincerity. Still, I had sacrificed everything for a brief burst of ecstasy. I wished I could convince myself it was merely an error of judgment. A single slip-up. On the other hand, I had an innate understanding that made me foolish. My heart raced with excitement the second my phone rang and I saw Daniel's name. Because you were on my mind. I had no qualms about opening the message. When is tomorrow? I ought to have disregarded it. I should have just erased it and moved on. But instead, I hit the seal button after typing the 2 words. At what hour will it be? I promised myself I would only have a conversation with him the following day. A fresh start was what I needed. I knew I was deceiving myself the moment I entered his office and witnessed the longing in his eyes. Put on the door lock, he whispered. I was his again in an instant. There it is. The desk. That seat. It was perched atop the wall. We did not spare any expense on this occasion. Everything was utterly chaotic and careless. And that was absolutely delightful. What began as a single moment of solitude became habitual. There was always an excuse for me to stop by the bank every week. I informed Eric that I was in charge of the money. I reassured myself that it wouldn't hurt anyone and that nobody would detect it. However, I was engaging in a risky game. It seemed inevitable that someone would eventually notice. I was attempting to steady my beating heart as I left Daniel's office one day and almost ran into a familiar face. Lisa, please. She is someone I live next to. Her brow furrowed as she stood on the bank and stared at me. Hello, Claire, with an air of skepticism in her voice. She spoke. Where are you going? I spontaneously burst into laughter as panic swept through me. Oh, I'm just taking care of some account business. Her eyes swung to the door of Daniel's office. She then turned her gaze back to me. You've been frequenting this spot recently. I felt queasy. Yeah, it's just some banking stuff. I whimpered. Anyhow, I need to get going. Until then, with my heart racing, I dashed past her and out of the bank. Nosy Lisa was. Everything might fall apart in an instant if she began to probe. Taking extra precautions was necessary. I kept telling myself to slow down, to quit before it got too bad. But I knew deep down that I wouldn't. I was already deeply involved. With my heart pounding in my chest, I stepped into the home, holding my breath. My flesh was still raw from Daniel's touch as I hurried out of his office. As a result of our illegal contact, my body tingled and my lips swelled. My marital and husband-related concerns should have occupied my thoughts at the time. On the contrary, I found myself fixated on the prospect of seeing Daniel again. From the kitchen, I could then make out Eric's voice. I think it would be beneficial for us to have a conversation. Claire. A shiver went down my back as I heard those words. My thoughts were racing as I gripped my purse tightly. Was he aware? Was he aware? Stepping forward as if nothing was wrong, I swallowed hard and faked a grin. However, I sensed that something was off on a deeper level. Sitting at the kitchen table, Eric had a mug of coffee in his hands. Something else obscured his normally pleasant and warm eyes. I recently came across some information that made my stomach knot. Is that all right? I spoke in a gentle tone as I inquired. Before he spoke, he looked at me closely. Recently, you have changed your behavior. I felt a slight flutter in my heart. Can you explain? He rubbed his temple and let out a breath. Your absence is often. I sense that you are preoccupied with something else. Or at least emotionally disconnected. He stopped, his eyes meeting mine. Is there anything you must convey to me? The burden of my secret weighed heavily on me for a little moment. This very second, I could admit it, be honest with him, ask for pardon. However, the overwhelming terror of parting ways with our marriage, our children, and our shared existence was intolerable. Shaking my head, I mustered up an effort to laugh. That's definitely not the case. Dear friend, to be honest, I've been quite busy. It was evident that he remained unpersuaded. Who is occupied with what? In search of a response. My thoughts raced. I am involved in the banking business. Organizing our financial situation. You know. In his gaze, I detected a hint of uncertainty. Still, he gave a slow nod. Very well, he replied. His tone gave it away that he wasn't completely sold. I tried to divert his attention by kissing his cheek. I assure you, everything is okay. However, remorse nagged at me as I distanced myself. Simply put, everything was wrong. I made an effort to forget about Eric's mistrust. Something different, though, transpired the following day. I received some information that turned my stomach. Lisa, please. With her arms crossed and a knowing expression on her face. She approached me as I was loading groceries into my car. Hi, Claire, she casually remarked. Hi, Lisa. My response was an artificial grin. She rested her weight on my vehicle. Yesterday, I ran into you again at the bank. My neck began to tingle with a chill. Sure, I said hastily. I'm just dealing with a few things. With a mischievous grin, Lisa spoke. Quite amusing. As you exited the manager's office, I beheld you. What a mess you looked like. 2. I felt a parched throat. It was nothing. Too fast, I remarked. She widened her gaze. Claire, exercise caution if what I perceive as your actions are correct. In my ears, my heart was pounding. What are you talking about? I'm confused. A grave look crossed Lisa's face as she heaved a sigh. You don't have to worry that I'm passing judgment. This kind of secret, though, doesn't remain hidden for very long. My heart was pounding as she strode away before I could say anything. Had she understood it? Will she confide in anyone? A new kind of terror began to take hold. The precarious ground I was traversing was beginning to give way. I was unable to get any rest that night. Lisa's remarks are still resonating within me. I couldn't shake Eric's suspicion. I had to pause. Before it became too late, I had to break up with Daniel. My determination waned the following day as his message pierced my phone. Meet me today, Daniel. Your thoughts keep circling in my mind. Instantly, I found myself back in his office. Once again, he held it. The situation was spiraling out of control. The moment I stepped into the house that night, I sensed a disturbance. Sitting in the living room in the low light, Eric's face was unreadable. A half-empty tumbler of whiskey rested next to his open laptop on the sofa table. The atmosphere exuded a sense of impending storm. So he swiveled the laptop so it was facing me. Every beat ceased. There were several messages displayed on the screen. Daniel and I were in constant communication. I could feel the veins in my face drying up. Will you mind providing some context? Uncomfortably quiet was Eric's voice. Then everything in my universe came tumbling down. I stood tall despite the weakness in my legs. Don't, Eric. There was an interruption. Betrayal sparked a fire in his eyes. His jaw was so clenched that I was afraid it would crack. My thoughts were racing, and I gasped for air. How did he discover it? I felt quite cautious. Lisa, he murmured as if he could read my thoughts. She recognized you. She assembled the pieces of the puzzle. Then I went ahead and looked at your phone. Lisa, I was wrong about her. Ed, I implore you. I began anew. Your pain was never my intention. But you did, he remarked angrily. He sounded somewhat nervous. What is the duration of your relationship with him? Claire, tell me how long you've been secretly seeing him. I started to cry. I confessed, a couple of months. It would be counterproductive to lie at this time. Shaking his head, he grinned bitterly. A few months, he said again. I kept telling myself that I was just hallucinating. Perhaps I was overanalyzing the situation. Suddenly, he gave me a serious look. The woman I wed and loved had already departed. Though, hadn't she? I felt his words cut deep. Whispering to Eric, I told him I've always loved him. But you stopped choosing me, he shot back. There and then, the crushing weight of my decisions overwhelmed me. That was my job. My actions completely destroyed us. No one yelled at Eric. Neither did he yell at me or throw objects. That just made things worse. Finally, with a hollow voice, he added, I want you to leave. I was taken aback. Hello, Eric, I need time, he said, cutting me off. Give me some room. At this very moment, I need to be alone with myself. My eyes welled up with tears as I snatched a bag and threw some garments inside. I felt it. This was taking place. On my way to the door, I took a final detour. My apologies, I murmured. Silent he remained. Eric, as if he was still in denial. He stared at the evidence of my treachery, a laptop screen, without moving an eyebrow. Then I got up and left. I did not visit Daniel. It was too much for me to bear. I chose to stay in a budget hotel on the outskirts of town, where the walls seemed to be closing in on me. After what felt like months, I was finally on my own. There will be no kisses taken. Avoid passionate evenings. There was no one else present but me. My apologies. In my mind, the excitement was worth taking a chance on. Now, though, as I sank onto the uncomfortable motel bed and stared up at the ceiling, the truth hit me. It was all over for me. Only I could bear the responsibility. When trust is shattered, it's nearly impossible to put it back together again. A single night affair can lead to a lifetime of self-doubt. Weigh the temporary thrills against the potential loss of everything important to you before giving in to temptation. Your support in the form of a like, share, and subscription would mean the world to us if you found this article entertaining.